So I was walking along this street earlier today and I spotted on the lawn here this guy, and I thought at the time, I was in a bit of a rush, didn't have time to have much of a look. I thought it might be the start of a giant puffball. So I've popped back to have a closer look. I've knocked on the door and asked permission, and the people who live here have kindly said I'm allowed to not only go on their lawn but also dig up their mushroom and take a video. Now, as I say, I was just in a bit of a rush earlier, so I didn't have a close look, but I already know it's certainly not a puffball, because when I feel underneath, it's not big and round coming out the ground. It's actually attached to the ground via a stem or a stipe. So we're going to have to dig it up and have a bit of a closer look underneath to see what's going on. We're going to do all we can not to damage the lawn here. Okay. So as you can see, it's not coming out of a big egg sac at the bottom, which rules out a lot of the dangerous mushrooms. So now I'm thinking that it's going to be a field mushroom. So the next thing we're going to do is cut it in half and check the gills, and hopefully they're not bright white. So there we go, you can see those off-white gills and white flesh. This is a really typical version of a field mushroom, which is an edible. Now, the lookalikes that you need to worry about with these mushrooms are the yellow stainers. Now, there's no yellow staining at all happening here. Yellow stainers, you can tell just by piercing the cap with your thumbnail, and they will stain quite a bright yellow quite quickly. Another key identifier for this mushroom is to give it a smell. And this one smells lovely and mushroomy, not at all chemically, which is how the yellow stainer would normally smell, which is the poisonous lookalike. So we are now very confident that we have a field mushroom, an edible mushroom. So I'm just going to show you some of these other guys that are going to be coming up over the next day or two, because they're actually forming, as you can see, a ring. Which means that under the ground here, the mycelium are probably taking up most of this circle, and they tend to move outward. They send up their fruiting bodies, the mushrooms, around the edge of the mycelial web underneath the ground. So another mushroom that looks very, very similar is the horse mushroom. Now, horse mushrooms tend to get a bit bigger, and in addition to that, when the horse mushroom separates its cap from the stem, it tends to form a cogwheel pattern. And if we pull the stem away from here, that's not happening. You see, this veil is not separating in a cogwheel fashion, but confusing it with a horse mushroom is not anything to worry about, because the horse mushroom is equally edible and equally delicious. Field mushroom growing on your lawn. How about that? Now, I've spotted some little white dots in the field. Can you see them? And there's more further up. So they might not be, but at first glance they could well be some field mushrooms. So we're going to find somewhere to park on this country road and find somewhere we can get in and have a look. So you can see behind me here, and all stretching out into the distance, and they go on and on and on, and this whole field, you see these little white spots? These are all field mushrooms. Now, to the forager, you've got two different types of agaric mushrooms that are very, very similar. So you've got these guys, which are agaricus campestris. These are the field mushrooms, the ones we've been talking about. You also have agaricus arvensis, which is the horse mushroom. I've done a video on those before. They're very, very similar. All the key identification features for the forager and to keep you safe are the same. So we're going to open this up, and we've got a white mushroom. We've got no egg sac that it's growing out of. A nice stout stem. We're going to make sure the gills are not white, which I'm already, pretty much sure they won't be. and we check it for yellow staining, and we give it a smell. So these are the ones I could see from the car. The main difference between the field mushroom and the horse mushroom is the size. So a field mushroom is usually much smaller. It's a typical size, whereas horse mushrooms get to be much, much bigger. But in terms of the key identification features, we use the same tests. It's also the same lookalike mushroom that we need to identify against, and that's the yellow stainer. So hopefully by the end of this video, you'll be fully clued up and have everything you need to know to go out and find some of these guys. When you find field mushrooms, they quite often grow in really, really large clusters. A little tip on habitats for these kinds of mushrooms. You'll notice behind me, we're on quite a slope. And this will be a field that's used for grazing rather than crops for that reason. And as a result, it's not a monoculture. You'll see that there's all sorts of weeds and stuff growing in here. It almost certainly doesn't ever get sprayed with anything too brutal. So this field is almost left to just do whatever it's going to do rather than being overly managed. And that's a perfect environment for mushrooms. So it always pays to keep your eyes open, even when you're driving, because I was driving past this park that I'm in, and you can see the road, and you probably just caught a glimpse of what I saw from the road. All these guys. And these are going to be horse mushrooms or field mushrooms. So as with the field mushroom I showed you before, you can see we're white on top, nice stout stem, no vulva, no egg sac. We're obviously going to do the smell test as well, and that smells lovely and mushroomy, so very happy with that. And you can see here how the gills darken as they age. So I've just got back to the house and I just want to run through very quickly the key ID features for this mushroom. So you're looking for a mushroom with a white or very nearly white cap, a nice stout stem, no vulva or egg sac at the bottom. And now we're on to some of the really important features. Not white gills. So you can see the flesh of this mushroom is white and the gills are off-white. Now as it ages and the cap opens up, they'll become darker and browner, and they do actually get really quite dark brown. And that is very important. Any mushroom with clear white gills runs the risk of being something completely different that is potentially dangerous. And then finally, you want to avoid the lookalike of this mushroom, which is potentially dangerous, and that is the yellow stainer. And we do that with two things. Firstly, the staining test. Now obviously just cutting it in half is a good way of doing that. This would all stain yellow in a yellow stainer almost always, and then by just scoring it with our thumbnail, and you can see there is absolutely no staining there at all. Finally, the smell. Lovely mushroomy smell. I would say ever so slightly nutty, but my sense of smell isn't great. If your sense of smell isn't great, the other test you can do to enhance the smell is just cut a small piece, put it in the microwave for 15 seconds. And if it turns bright yellow and gives off a really strong chemically smell, that's a great way of just enhancing that test, those tests for the yellow staining mushroom. So there you go, field mushroom. It's really delicious. It's a great breakfast mushroom. I'm going to just fry this up and have it with some eggs and bacon. And it also dries really well for storing. As always, if you find these videos valuable, there's several ways you can support them, and the easiest of which is to subscribe to our channel, leave a comment down below and press that like button. You can also find us every Monday, Wednesday and Friday with our podcast on the Self-Sufficient Hub podcast, which can be found wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for watching. Speak to you next time.